Okay, that was Ripple, 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 the Ripple song. We love it. Welcome, everyone. Let's start off as we usually do with introducing our team. I'm Pam Stager, Director of Public Education for Courageous RI, and I'm calling in from Jamestown, Rhode Island tonight. This is the fourth in our Ripplers Are Courageous series. And once again, we've got some great educators who will be sharing their diverse ripple effect experiences with you. Yamaya, want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much, Pam. It's nice to see you all. My name is Yamaya Jean. I'm calling in from Cranston, Rhode Island, and I'm a program director here with CRI.
Terrific. And if you haven't, we'll meet our presenters in a little while, but if you haven't already and you're here with us, please introduce yourself and where you're calling in from tonight in the chat. And while you're doing that, we're going to get started by sharing an overview of some of our program goals and results so far for any newcomers. So Courageous RI goals and strategies are mentioned in these opening slides. As you can see there on the smartphone, community conversations to counter disinformation, enhance civic participation, and improve media literacy. That's what we tried to do and are continuing to try to do in our Courageous RI project that was funded by the Department for Homeland Security. So in Courageous RI, we did that by learning and applying media literacy skills, finding common ground through conversation to prevent violence and extremism. So for all nine, so the four prevention strategies that we used for our 18 events that we used throughout the program were media literacy, active listening, kindness and compassion, and community engagement. And these are some of the interesting stats that we have collected so far. With Courageous Conversations, our first program, we had a total of 22 online events covering 10 topics and then 2 about the ripple effect. We had a total of 1,260 total participants. We were thrilled, especially since so many of our participants were already professionals working in education or library science, that there was still a 35% knowledge gain, but we were most excited about the 81% real life application for what they were learning and talking about and discussing during Courageous Conversations. So the Courageous Conversations Professional Development Program was our second program. That journey was very similar to the Courageous Conversations topics, but we tweaked it to make it mostly relevant to educators who were in the classroom, and so that it was easily focused on their needs in the classroom and in schools. So the goal was to reduce the hate and fear that leads to violence, and we did that by showing them how to engage with courageous questions, to consider the misperceptions we hold, to analyze and evaluate all forms of media, to reflect on storytelling as both political and personal, to engage with and empower their learners, and to behold the power of creative expression. As you see on the left, we had guiding questions for every single topic that we explored with our educators. For example, in high conflict, what is the difference between good conflict and high conflict? And the others that are listed there. We're big on questions in Courageous RI. Next slide, Maya. Then the ripple effect, which is what we're highlighting tonight, came out of those two first programs because what we were telling all the participants of both Courageous Conversations and the Professional Development Program was that the Media Education Lab, we wanted to support people who want to offer a local structured conversation series in either face-to-face or online formats. They were to bring media literacy to their community as they examine the growing problem of violent extremism and to discover common ground as they explored practical strategies to reduce the hate that leads to violence. So that's what we charged people with, and we were thrilled with how many people rose to the occasion to do ripple effects. And that's why these Ripplers Are Courageous sessions, these webinars, are highlighting some of those ripple effects. Next slide. Ah, okay.
Did you want it? Sorry, I thought you wanted to show the
Oh,
website.
yeah. Okay, you're going to the website now. Right. Okay. So with every some of the resources and support that we offer for a ripple effect event were to create an in-person or an online dialogue and discussion group for all 9 topics we covered in Courageous Conversations. You could use a lesson plan for implementing that topic in a classroom or the community. The slides we used for the live event were available for the Ripplers, a video with key ideas. We offered further reading on the topic and a guide for implementing a ripple effect on the topic. And a page on the portal where you can listen in to the small group discussions we had, which was a really interesting AI-assisted aspect to the program where you could actually listen into some of those conversations. And it was interesting that some of our Ripplers actually had their students or their participants in their sessions listen into some of those conversations and then discussed what was being discussed. And they found that sometimes it was easier for people to jump into a conversation when they were talking about what somebody else said about a topic, rather than just being asked to give their own opinion right away. So those are the resources that we offer for anyone who is interested in doing a ripple effect, and we will continue to have ripple effects going until the end of our grant-funded period, which is September. And if we have any money left over at the end, we'll ask for a no-cost extension and keep it going beyond that even. So we are hopeful that there will be some more ripples still happening in the summertime. And also you can, in addition to the resources we have, we're available for one-to-one coaching for anyone who wants to implement a ripple effect event. Both Renee and I are available for coaching sessions. And there's, Maya is showing you now where on that website and webpage you can find that at the very bottom under Get It Done. So tonight, we are going to hear from 3 courageous and amazing educators who have taken leadership in implementing Courageous Conversations in their professional communities. In doing so, they're helping people activate those 4 key competencies of Courageous RI: media literacy, active listening, kindness and compassion, community engagement. Kate Ray is an educator at Cranston High School West in Rhode Island. Bob Van Oosterhout is a psychologist, educator, author, and Media Ed Lab affiliate based in Michigan. And Emily Bush is an instruction and digital learning librarian at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. We're asking each guest presenter to briefly tell their ripple effect story in 5 to 10 minutes or more if necessary, focusing on what type of ripple events you created or plan to create, your motivation for doing so, your target audiences or audience, your chosen courageous conversation or professional development topics that you utilized, if any. And if your events have already happened, any feedback or results you'd like to share. And then we'll have a Q&A time for deeper discussion. So we'll have our presenters go in the order in which they are pictured, and they'll screen share any slides they have for their presentation. So take it away, Kate. Hopefully you'll be able to share your screen now.
Okay. Yeah, so I am Kate Ray, and I am a teacher, an English teacher at Cranston High School West. And I primarily used the Courageous Rhode Island curriculum with my AP Lang students, AP Language and Composition students. And I'll tell you a little bit about how that went and what I did. And I'll just start with saying that I participated in the Courageous RI 10-hour PD last fall, and I worked with thought partners, which I found incredibly a powerful experience in bringing some new ideas into my teaching in these topics of media literacy. I do teach some electives as well, but I chose to use the Courageous Rhode Island curriculum in AP Lang because there's some nice overlap. We are thinking about speaker and audience and the relationship between those two all the time, and we're analyzing texts all the time using similar questions to the media literacy questions. Also, I found that these students, so we did like a little pre-survey, and these students said that they really had minimal explicit media literacy education. And they also had kind of limited digital and information literacy in terms of evaluating things that they found online, using online journals, and conducting research. So I kind of tried to bring in a lot of different elements of the curriculum that we explored in the course in the PD and the curriculum that exists online. So I used the Why the Media Literacy Matters component quite a bit. I had students research media literacy and form an argument about if, when, and how students in public education should be receiving instruction in media literacy. Then I had them choose a particular issue, current event, topic. These ranged from politics to gender stereotypes to all different kinds of things, and how those issues were portrayed in the media, different perspectives that were represented in the media. They had to use social media, news media. They were given a list of criteria. If they worked in a group of 2, they had to actually analyze 5 artifacts. And if they worked alone, they had to analyze 3 artifacts. And they had to use those media literacy questions to unpack what they were seeing online. They had to consider how consumers of media need to be aware of certain aspects of the conversation surrounding this topic. So after they unpacked their analysis, they had to then kind of take it back to media literacy and why we need media literacy to be careful in consuming information on this given topic. They needed to use a little more research at this point too to consider how the conversation might be reframed. So using facts from good scholarly academic sources to support that part of the argument. They had to create their own media, and then overall they had to reflect on their learning at the end and how media literacy is important in terms of fully understanding the topic that they chose to explore, and any other topic that they might confront in the media landscape. So I have a few samples here of what these projects ended up looking like. The first student here, she was looking at political extremism and she presented her media literacy arguments. The fact that we are encountering much more information online, particularly children and teens, and that media literacy should be a required component of education because students need skills. Then she presented some further research to support exactly what she was talking about in terms of why media literacy is important. And here's her artifacts that she went online and analyzed. And I had students use the 5 media literacy questions to talk about what they saw and unpack these things. So here she talks about, the meme maker and the audience and how the audience might perceive this particular media artifact. Then she used, for her next artifact, she used Legally Blonde and explored the kind of implications and the messages that are put out there through media about blonde women. Then she used an advertisement. So there was a full range of things that students chose. She used some political examples. She used the Barbie movie. Again, looking at this film, how it explored both what it means to be a woman, but also a man. So I'm sorry, this project, I think I said was the political extremism one. This was about gender stereotypes. The political extremism one is later on. So this is all about gender stereotypes and how they are presented in the media and just unpacked by these students. Yeah. And then at the end, she came back and reflect on how do we recognize these gender stereotypes in the media? What kinds of tropes are we encountering? How to look for keywords like traditional roles, and how those stereotypes might restrict people and what they see. She looked at how to combat these gender stereotypes in the media, looking at developing characters who are outside of traditional roles, promoting media that calls for better representation of different groups of people, more facts, ideas, proposed solutions. These students did a great job with really thinking deeply about these topics and connecting everything to how media literacy helps them understand these topics and be wary of what they see online and how to talk about them too. I also had students incorporate stories. So this person chose to focus on the story of Brooke Shields, this single story of her life and how she wasn't really educated and her life was stressful as she tried to be the perfect woman in the 80s. They created their own piece of media here, this vision board kind of showing all the expectations that are placed on women. And I thought it was an effective little piece that they did. Then at the end, there was just some time for reflecting things that they learned, how women are depicted in media overall, and again, why media literacy is important, is an important tool, particularly for young people, to help them understand what they are seeing and think carefully about the media that they're consuming. This was the presentation on political extremism. I don't think I want to take too much time going over that, but you can see the projects varied based on the topics that students chose. And students did a really good job, again, of analyzing speaker, the relationship with audience, the techniques used to engage different audiences, and they did a great job. Overall, I did conduct a survey at the end of the course because we are almost at the end of school. And students did report that this was one of their favorite projects in the course. So I think it was quite successful. I definitely learned a lot myself, and we'll do it again and we'll tweak it a little bit next year. And I hope to maybe even extend into some professional development. I think that there is a lot of opportunity for this curriculum to be used in classrooms. So
Wow, that was fantastic, Kate. I'm really impressed with some of those projects. They're great. I hope some of those students maybe submitted something for our youth media contest.
Yes, I did encourage them to. So,
Okay,
yeah,
great.
yeah.
All right, next up is Bob Van Oosterhout. Bob, you want to take it away and tell about what you're planning for this summer?
Yeah, thank you. I'm working on a course, developing a course. Title is Perception, Fear, and Media: Roots of Polarization. And polarization is a key component in extremism and also in violence. And polls indicate that 60 to 70% of Americans believe that polarization is one of the most serious problems we face today. I think it's one of the most serious. We can't solve other problems if we can't work together. So polarization is fed by mistrust. We don't trust each other because we don't understand each other. We don't understand each other because we view our world through frames that don't overlap. Most of these frames are created by media, particularly political media. Many of us spend more time with media than we do with each other. Our sense of reality is increasingly defined by media. Media finances its operations by selling attention, our attention. The primary source of income for much of the popular media is our time and focus. Selling attention generates huge profits, and we don't see any of it. The most efficient way to grab our attention is fear. Fear is the survival emotion. It narrows our focus on danger and sends a surge of energy to run or fight from threats. The urge to act quickly blocks our ability to see and think clearly. Seeing and think clearly is precisely what we need at these times. It's also what's missing in too many of our conversations. The surge of energy produced by fear isn't discharged by running or fighting. It's used to build tension. Tension draws our mind to potential threats and the media that reports them. We have to know the horrific details of every tragedy, even though it was far away and there's nothing we can do about it. It just creates more fear, which then produces more tension. Tension becomes a part of life. Fear becomes a habit. Obstacles to seeing and thinking clearly become structured in our brains as tension builds in our bodies. I call this fear-based thinking. The essential features of fear-based thinking are self-centeredness, a need for control and certainty, a tendency to put everyone and everything into broad categories, an adversarial mindset, narrow, fragmented thinking, and a scarcity mentality. Each of these block our ability to see and think clearly. Most of the threats we face are produced by other humans, humans who see a different reality than we do, humans who profit by grabbing our attention through fear, humans who don't trust us, humans who are stuck in fear and fear-based thinking. Fear isolates and separates us. We don't trust each other because we don't know each other. Belonging is an essential human need that can't be met by watching or listening to media. Media produces a sense of false belonging. What we see or hear on screens and headphones provides a temporary sense of connection that can never be enough. Some of us know the characters in our favorite programs better than we know our neighbors. This false belonging is temporarily satisfying, but it doesn't meet that essential human need. Some media messages tell us that belonging is conditional, that it depends on how we look and what we own. A lot of political media messages promote belonging by exclusion. We feel connected through a shared aversion to other people, or more accurately, categories of people. We distrust and even feel disgust and hatred for people we don't know and have never met. Conditional belonging and belonging by exclusion create more fear. We can be rejected at any time if we don't toe the line or keep up with changing expectations. A true sense of belonging is built on trust. Trust that's been lost because we can't get on the same page. Trust that's been blocked by fear. Trust that will elude us as long as we're stuck in fear-based thinking. How can we begin to trust each other? We gain trust through understanding. We can start by understanding perception, how it affects emotion and belief, how it's manipulated to feed divisiveness. We can learn how media works. We can learn to identify the tools and tactics that influence how we see and think about our world and each other. We can understand fear, and we can work out how to transform it into caution, care, curiosity, and connection. We can learn to recognize and deal with fear-based thinking in ourselves and others. Trust can be rebuilt, one person, one group at a time. We need to learn how to connect with those who see a different world than we do. We need to learn how to create a shared reality that allows us to work together to solve our problems and enjoy life. These are the goals of the class. Perception, fear, and media, roots of polarization. There's six sessions, sorry. They start July 21st. Each session will take about an hour or so to complete. And the sessions 1, 2, 4, and 5 are on your own time. There's opportunities for online discussion in small groups. Sessions 3 and 6 are live, and there's time for questions and discussion. And there's a link in the chat that will give you more information about the course, and I hope that you'll join us. One of my goals for the course is to create a ripple that will continue to ripple. I'm trying to design it so that teachers and presenters can use the information in their own situation to help their students and participants understand the roles that perception, fear, and media play in our lives, and how we can use that to work together and solve our problems and bring peace and harmony to our lives. If I have time, I'd like to tell a short story.
Sure, go ahead,
Okay,
Bob.
okay. Back in 1991, I was living up north, and I planted a dogwood tree, planted a bunch of trees that year. It was off in a distant meadow. And we had a drought that year and actually had a traffic accident, had some surgery, and it didn't get watered. And I just thought they were all, just few survived, but I thought, the rest of them just didn't make it. And 17 years later, I was walking back in that part of the meadow, and I noticed the little bowl. I tend to plant things in a bowl so the water runs down to it. And there's this little dogwood tree about 2 inches bigger than when I planted it. And it's still alive. I bent it and it didn't break. And it's like, oh my God, this is still alive. And I dug it up and I brought it into the garden, and I've got a 6-foot fence around it to keep the deer and rabbits out. And it's got fine organic soil in it, and planted it there. And my neighbor came by and said, why are you planting that chewed up spindly stick? And I said, oh, this is a dogwood tree that I planted 17 years ago. It looks like it's still alive. I want to see what's going to happen. Well, about 6 or 7 years later, that dogwood tree was like 6 feet tall. It was covered with flowers, and the flowers turned to berries. And I remember that Christmas, there were 6 pairs of cardinals on that dogwood tree having Christmas dinner with the berries on the tree. It was just wonderful. So I asked, what's the true nature of a dogwood tree? Is it to be a chewed up spindly stick? Or is it to be, actually, I saw it last year, it's 14 feet tall now, it's way bigger than I was, okay? Or is it to be fully grown, covered with flowers and berries for the birds, okay? Being a chewed up spindly stick was how it adapted to threats and isolation, okay? Once it had its needs met, then its true nature came through. And so I wondered, could we be the equivalent of a chewed up spindly stick? Have we adapted to a life of fear? Have we diminished ourselves in order to survive and lost track of our potential and who we can really be? And the story is a little bit misleading because, we can't put a fence around ourselves and meet all of our needs. Okay, some of us would like to, but that's not realistic. And that's what I did for the dogwood tree. But if you look at a dogwood tree in nature, okay, it's on the edge of the woods, and there's a bunch of them. And that one had probably 20 or 30 shoots coming up all around it. So it was creating a family of dogwood trees. And understanding forests is really fascinating because it's amazing how they work together. And there are actually fungi underneath the soil that even help to communicate and share nutrients between different trees. So it's part of a community, and that's how it survives in a community. And that's what we can do. And that's the goal of this course, is to bring us together and help us understand the obstacles to working together and to spread that so that we don't see any more chewed up spindly sticks.
Thank you, Bob. That's great. I'm really hoping you're going to get a lot of people at your summer sessions. It sounds wonderful. Okay, and finally, we'll turn to Emily Bush, who's going to share about her project or group of projects.
Yeah, let's see if I can share. Okay. So I'm Emily Bush. I'm a librarian at Vanderbilt University, and we are very fortunate in our libraries that we are able to offer Buchanan Fellowships, which are endowed by this Buchanan family, but we are allowed as librarians to create these fellowships and be as creative as we like. I think I'm going somewhat outside the bounds of what the librarians normally do with these fellowships and focusing on media literacy. But when I participated in the PD last fall, I knew that I wanted to build a fellowship around the courageous conversation. So this spring, the fellowship that I offered was enhancing civic engagement across the generations through media literacy education, very long name, but this fellowship was centered around undergraduate students leading 3 community conversations, one which came out of the PD from last spring, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So these undergraduates led these discussions with community partners, and then they also, part of the fellowship is creating a deliverable, created a media object that would enhance civic engagement through media literacy. So the first conversation, there were 3 fellows, was with the University School of Nashville. So this ended up being more of a peer-to-peer conversation. I was hoping for intergenerational, but the university school is a private school, very convenient. We had some transportation issues to the university. It's actually right across the street from the library. So the 3 fellows presented on free speech, hate speech, and censorship. Dr. Hobbs was kind enough to come and speak to them early in the semester and introduce the curriculum, and then I allowed them to choose whatever they were most interested in, and that is what they chose. These 3 undergrads are very civically engaged. They're part of Vandy Votes. A couple of them were part of Vanderbilt's Project on Unity and Democracy, which has a lot in common with the Courageous Conversations. So that was their first, kind of warming them up by talking to some peers. The second conversation that they led was with a Center for Older Adults in the community, and this was a very lively conversation. They used the same curriculum for this group, but something that we talked about was changing up examples for different audiences. And also being cognizant of what terminology they might need to go deeper in explaining, like deplatforming, for example, is talked about in that particular piece of curriculum. So they went into a little bit more detail with this group, but it was a really lively conversation. I enjoyed listening in on it. And then the final conversation was a little bit different. This came out of the partnership from the professional development. I worked with Joshua Walker, who is an instructional coach at Coalinga Middle School out in California. So not part of the Nashville community, but we thought this would be kind of a cool project, trying to figure out how to get these undergrads to teach some media literacy skills to middle schoolers. Because we're in Central Time and they're in Pacific Time, and these Vanderbilt students can be very hard to schedule, we decided to use Flip. And they went through the 5 questions with the middle school students, the 5 questions of media literacy, and each of the undergraduates chose a piece of media for the middle schoolers to analyze using the 5 questions. And then the middle schoolers worked in groups to answer those questions. I won't go into all the details of what we would do differently. It was a learning experience. We worked with the journalism class and the teacher was out the whole week. So that kind of threw a curveball having a substitute, but it did get done. And you know, I hope that the middle schoolers learned something from it. I know that my students did, and they really enjoyed it. So I wanted to share just a few of the reflections from the fellows. At the end of the semester, they're asked to write a reflection about their experience with the fellowship. So this is from one of the students I highlighted because it's kind of a long excerpt. They had a newfound appreciation for how people's lived experiences in real life and on social media influence their outlook on media literacy's broader implications. And then this student, who I should point out, one of the students couldn't be part of the conversation at the Center for Older Adults. So she talks more about working with younger generations. She wrote, "Through this experience, I have gained valuable insights into the concerns and perspectives of younger generations, reaffirming the importance of intergenerational dialogue and fostering meaningful change. Participating in this fellowship has reinforced my belief in the transformative potential of civic engagement and the importance of amplifying youth voices in shaping our collective future." And then the final reflection that I'll share, the student said, "This journey didn't just make me more knowledgeable about the importance of media literacy education. It inspired me to continue this work outside the fellowship through conversations with friends, families, and peers." So that ripple effect. And importantly, being a fellow was more than just a discussion and learning, it was action. So we had really positive feedback. They all finished their final media objects, and I encouraged them to enter them into the youth media contest. I don't know if any of them did. I really hope the one that did a podcast submitted hers, but I'm not sure. They tend to be perfectionists. So I hope they did, but I'm not sure. That's the long and the short of it.
Oh, thank you so much, Emily. Wow. Did the students I'm just curious right off the bat. Let's jump into this discussion time now. Did the students have a favorite of the ones who did all three? Did they have a favorite session?
I think it was the one at the high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe they were just more comfortable because that was more of a peer-to-peer situation, just slightly younger than them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was pretty unanimous. And they were all at that one.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly. So we're going to have our open Q&A period now. You can ask questions of each other and any clarifying questions. And just like in Courageous Conversations, we always review the guidelines for Courageous Conversations before we go into a discussion. And they are to speak for yourself and out of your own experiences, to allow others to speak for themselves, to share the time, allow others to finish speaking and take turns, to stay curious, ask honest questions, pause and when you need to, take time for reflection, practice active listening, listen generously, assume good intentions while also recognizing that your words have an impact, and to stay engaged. When possible, close unnecessary programs, applications, and notifications, and put your phone on silent so you can be fully present. So let's open up the discussion now. I'm thrilled that we talked a little bit about how the ripples might keep rippling from some of these projects. And we want to talk about how having courageous conversations anywhere we can. Ripples happen in families. For some of you, that may mean the way you've applied what you learned through dialogue with friends and family. Ripples happen in classrooms, in libraries, in workplaces. And if you are considering or planning an event, we're thrilled. And in the discussion, you can reflect on what you're thinking about or ask our presenters any of these questions. What successes did you feel like you had? What challenges did you experience? And did a possibility or potential for the future arise along the way? So let's open the conversation now. I see Renee is with us, albeit in her car.
I have a question. That first of all, all three of those were amazing, and I have questions for everyone. But I start with Kate. Kate, I am really impressed with what your students were able to accomplish, and I think you did a really good job of helping us understand how media literacy fits inside the AP class with its focus on author, purpose, point of view, reasoning, evidence, and all of that. I wonder, compared to how you might usually teach that class, like, what did you learn by having there be a media focus? What did you learn about your students by how they tackled this project?
Well, first of all, they were really engaged in a way. They were picking their own topics. So I think that the engagement definitely skyrocketed, which was great to see. And it also, it exposed me to interests that I didn't know that they had. We had quite a few sort of politically curious people. So when we had so many students who were interested in that as a topic, I kind of encouraged them to look at specific races across the country and even locally, so that we could really see a broad range of discussions. And that was really fun. And I really so I ended up teaching this across 4 sections of this class. And in certain groups, the conversations just went on and on. And students really, you could hear them talking about each other's projects even after they had concluded. So they were really interested in the things that they uncovered together and the conversations that they had. And I think that they all really learned like that idea of like the lateral reading. So go out and find multiple perspectives on the topics. Can you find a voice that should be centered that we're not hearing from? So things like that were new and different. And I think that using media is different than just using a text on paper or something like that, something older and not as relevant to them in the world that they're living in right now.
Wow, I just think these student-generated presentations are so powerful and have so much potential. And I'm wondering if there's a way to create a library of them. If every semester students are developing this, if this is something that could be shared, and other people could use or watch, have access to. I don't know if that's possible or how it would work, but it was just something I thought of while I was listening to this. It's like, wow, it'd be great if more people could see these things.
Well, we do have on our website, we have the lesson plans that the educators that came to the professional development, their final project was to create a lesson plan, and they're all available on our website. But the archive of what is happening, especially when they take those lesson plans off the paper and into the classroom, I think really are it's a very interesting idea, and why Renee and I want to write a blog post about this particular group of educators and what you've done, because it's such a wide range. Renee, you said you had questions for everybody. Do you want to ask your next one? She might not be, she might be in a drop zone now. So, Emily, I was wondering about, I know when I was first communicating with you about your project, and you mentioned that you were doing older adults as one of your target audiences. I was excited because I think that's a group that is somewhat overlooked. And I know, Bob, you at one point in time tried to get something going at a senior center near you, I think, right? And then they lost the guy you were dealing with left or something. One of the challenges of doing these things in the community. But you also mentioned, Emily, that it was a lively discussion. And you were there to observe. I was wondering, what was there anything that surprised you about what the seniors or the 50+ people were interested in?
Yeah, they were a pretty savvy crowd. They took the conversation in a direction that I hadn't anticipated, talking more about their grandkids and their use of social media and how it's affecting their mental health. One of them was a pastor and spoke about, I believe it was a member of her congregation that had committed suicide based on social media. So it went in a direction that I didn't anticipate, and we started to talk a little bit about how to reach their grandkids. We talked a little bit about speaking to like PTOs and parents, which is something that I've been interested in doing, and that's a little bit sticky, trying to get into a PTO. It's something that I've been thinking about, but just the directions that it took, everyone was really engaged in the conversation. It went straight to TikTok, which surprised me, because TikTok's always in the news, but it was very much in the news when the students presented. So I was kind of surprised that participants did not want the government to ban TikTok. I was surprised about that. But yeah, it was an interesting discussion, and I thought that the students did a great job moderating it.
Good. Okay, great.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that great story. It's interesting to think about how when we talk to parents about managing media use in the home, we're really thinking about the parents. And it's like, well, why don't we talk to the grandparents about this? And obviously the grandparents, although they had some fear about social media, they also didn't want it to be, censored. They didn't want it to be restricted. So that, like you said, there was a nuanced perspectives that were being offered for those 50+ folks. Interesting target audience for addressing issues like social media and mental health. Unpredictable topic, given that you were talking about hate speech and censorship, but in a way, it's what people are feeling in their families. They're noticing it with the people they love. So how cool that they felt comfortable enough to bring that to the table. Bravo.
Yeah. I think they're an untapped resource in media literacy, because I do think that grandparents spend a lot of time sometimes with their grandkids, and yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and I think we should be taking more advantage of it. Bob, I know that you recently did a presentation for other counselors and therapists that were affiliated with Braver Angels, which is another extremist and polarization prevention group. And I'm wondering how what you're presenting was viewed by them, and whether they had insights into how we can get people away from that fear-based thinking that you're talking about. Is that something that that we can intervene in some effective way?
Yeah, I think it's one person at a time and one group at a time. That it has to start with trust. And trust is a personal thing. It isn't something, I mean, you trust a group that you know a lot of people in or that you know a lot about. But so trust through understanding. And so the challenge is how to connect with someone who sees things different, because there's two frames that don't overlap. Okay, and there's this gap in between them that we don't see. So understanding how that works, I think, is a first step. But there's an acronym that we talk about that is helpful to remember and how to approach that. And the first step is, it's called Be Rich, BERICH. The first step is balance. We can't be upset or angry or tense when we're going to have a discussion with someone and try to make contact. We have to be in balance. We have to be relaxed. We have to be open to listening and hearing different things and not react. Okay, so this is before we have any contact. And the second part, the E and the B, is empathy. Put ourselves in their shoes before we talk, before we meet. How might their frame make sense to them? How might their experiences have led to how they see things, and realize that makes sense to them. We may not agree with it, but we understand that it makes sense to them. So when we've done those two first steps, now we can make some contact. And the first step there is respect. We have to start with respecting someone, seeing their dignity and potential, and appreciating that, and treating them with kindness, and being open. Okay, and then so with respect follows interest. Who is this person? What are your interests? What are you involved in? Where did this information come from? Just interest in who they are and what they're about, which, taken another step deeper, is curiosity. So become curious about how they came to that point of view, and what their background was, and where they got their information, and things like that. And then the last is humility, that we hold back on our own opinions. We're not there to win an argument. We're here to gain a deeper understanding and a broader understanding. And the best example of that is the story of Derek Black, which I've shared before. The young man who was a white supremacist and was invited to dinner by some Jewish students that he rejected at first, but he had no friends. And eventually, over a period of months of having dinner once a week and playing games, they started asking him questions about his beliefs. And he started doing research and realized that he was going in a direction that didn't have truth behind it. And he renounced his white supremacy. So he exactly followed through those steps.
Yeah, wow. And there are some really wonderful people like Derek who are doing great work, who were in extremist groups and have a perspective on why they were vulnerable to being recruited, and how they just bought into it, and then how they got out of it. And that's really interesting stuff. And I find that youth really resonate with those stories as well.
There's an organization, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
There's an organization called Life After Hate, and it supports people who are trying to get out of violent extremism. And I've gone through their training, and it's really a challenging task. I mean, because belonging by exclusion there is a really harsh thing, and it's a very difficult thing to move away from. So there is support out there for people who want to take that route.
Yes, there is. They're doing great work. Okay, we are getting close to the end of our time. So I want to, first of all, thank you all for coming and sharing your stories. We're so excited that you did these ripple effects, and they were all wonderful. Kate, I may want to call your students to come and testify before the Rhode Island State House when I go up again to push for media literacy education, because it sounds like they might be great. And my experience is that State House loves it when youth come to testify. So, but we're going to just do a couple of announcements before we leave. Yemaya, I think if you can go back to the last couple of slides, we want to just give you an update on where we are now with Courageous RI. We just passed the extended deadline for the youth media contest. And we got 80 submissions, and our judges are hard at work, looking through all of them and rating them and commenting on them. And then we will all get together next week and try and whittle it down to the winners that we have funds for. But I wanted to let you know also that there is, we're holding a youth media contest celebration at the Rhode Island PBS studios. We're looking into live streaming it as well, because we know we will probably have, because this was open to people across the country and across the world. Just like our other two programs, we may have winners from other places, so we're trying to figure out how we can get them involved. And Renee and I ourselves are going to be in the Azores at a media literacy conference on that date. But if anybody here in Rhode Island is interested in being invited, there's Catherine's email there that you can shoot her an email, and we have some spots left in the studio for that celebration. And I think that might be it for our announcements tonight. So just want to say thank you again for these wonderful presentations and for the work that you've done. It warms the cockles of our hearts to see how the ripples are flowing, and especially that the results seem to be making waves of their own and rippling out from there. So thanks again, Kate, Emily, Bob. Thanks so much for participating. Ramon for attending. Yamaya, thanks so much for doing the tech tonight. And we will be in touch. Bye, everyone.